Okay, welcome back to Fifth Avenue Hotel. So we have today a very interesting moment in today's morning. So we started with a lecture of Professor from Havana University, our personal friend here, Camilo. And we're going to be talking about the state of US and Cuba relationship, past, present, and future. So all the questions you may have, more than willing to answer. Enjoy your lecture. See you in a bit. Thank you.
So, buenos días. Buenos días. Okay, but you speak Spanish. You don't have any Spanish. Well, as she said, my name is Camilo. Well, it's Camilo Garcia Lopez Trigo. It's a little bit long. You know, here in Cuba, we have been following the Spanish tradition, using first the father's name and then the mother's name. And in my case, my mother's name is double, Lopez Trigo. It's a hyphenate last name. Which, by the way, is not very uncommon to find hyphenate last names here in Cuba. I'm sure that you were coming to Cuba, you made your homework, and you check it out, and then you remember the name of the current president here in Cuba? Well, everybody calls him Diaz-Canel, and Diaz-Canel is a hyphenate last name. That's why I'm saying Diaz-Canel. Well, in fact, he has a longer name than me, because he has two names, Miguel Mario, Diaz-Canel, and Bermudez. He's the mother. So I guess he needs two business cards. Or at least one in one side and the other, you know? Because it's too long. Well, I was graduated here in Havana in international relations, and I used to be a diplomat. For 20 years, I was working in the Foreign Service. My first posting was in Washington, D.C., back in 1995, 1996, during the Clinton administration. Then I was sent to Canada for 4 winters, for 4 years.
You did something bad.
That's a question all the time. No, yeah, I don't know if you have been in Ottawa. No, there. I mean, yes, in winter time. Well, it's difficult not to be there in winter time because they even say they have 2 seasons, winter and July. So if you it doesn't do. I got there once minus 53 Celsius. I always say that's a violation of human rights. It's not human to survive. I mean, I don't get it. But the weather is that. I mean, this is the Cuba winter, you know, for a tropical boy, but you can like me. Well, then later in 2004, 5, and 6, I was posted in the Netherlands, which was milder, beautiful, in the middle of Europe and all that. And the last 6 years working in the Foreign Service, I was posted as the Cuban representative to the 1st and the 4th Commission of the United Nations. So I was basically based in New York City, and Geneva and Vienna, because I mean those were the most important cities where the meetings were gathered and all that, and many other places. Because I mean, working related to the United Nations, you travel the world. I mean, they organize meetings the same in China, or in Brazil, or in Peru, in many other different places. Not anymore, because of personal reasons, I left the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Now I'm teaching at the university, basically as an invited professor for foreign policy, culture and history, and basically with American students coming in their semesters abroad program, which is, I mean, it hasn't stopped, fortunately. Not even in the worst moments of the relationship between the two sides of that. And also now that private businesses are having such a preeminence in the Cuban economy, I'm also working in the private sector. Together with a friend, we know each other from high school, we are managing an entertainment business. Which is, I mean, we are producers. We produce documentaries, films, video clips, fashion shows, concerts, and we produce that for everyone. I mean, for state enterprises or for private businesses or for institutions, if they pay, we do it. Yeah. And then the big problem is just to arrange the budget. My first time, I mean, I feel like the weatherman, you know. Here's a cold front coming down. That's it. You see, this is my name, Camilo Garcia Lopez Trigo. That's it. So, we're going to be talking for a little bit about, for about an hour, about the most important challenges that Cuba is having today. In 1 hour, it's going to be impossible to go through all the elements, details, and all that. But my intention is for you to try to understand, because when you have narratives from other countries, the narratives are always painting the countries in black and white. Gracias, mi hermanito. And my intention, yo soy profesor, I can project my voice. So, and this country is not in black and white. This country is colorful. It's full of ideas, proposals, things, and all that. I'm sure that you're going to be very familiar with many of the topics that I'm going to be talking about, but with the perspective from the other side of the sea, which is different many times. Well, my intention is for you to try to understand a little bit of the perspectives from Cuba on many of the changes, economic, political, and social changes, and relationship international with the United States, basically because it's our most important challenge in the foreign perspective. And all that. I just want to ask you, please do not get offended with anything that I'm going to say. I mean, this is not going to be very beautiful in some moments, and we have to talk sometimes about political personalities or policies and things that sometimes are delicate. Please do not take it personal. I'm just going to talk about the facts and the consequences that policies and all that, and just to try to understand, because that's what is important here. I mean, we're so close, and we need to understand each other. And we need to know, I mean, both sides of the story, and just to try to find ways just to have together a common road. So that is my intention. So if we agree with that, we agree with that. Yes. See? Gracias, hermanito. I'm going to talk about, I think this title is good for talking about the most important challenge that we have in the internal perspective, the domestic policies. Because I think that the most important challenge is to try to implement what the Cuban people were voting in 2019 as the new constitution of the republic. And yes, I know that the corporate media was not talking about that, but in February 24, 2019, 90% of the people went to vote for the new constitution, and 86% of the people were voting in favor of that constitution. And it was not an imposition from the government to say yes or no. No. It was having, before that, it was having about 2 years of debates, analysis, proposals, and I mean, there were 3 drafts of this piece of legislation. The original was introduced by the Constitutional Committee of the National Assembly. They were discussing, analyzing, and all that, but it changed 3 times. And at the end, we voted for what I say it was perhaps the best consensus that we could have among the Cubans in 2019. On what kind of changes, economical, political, and social changes should be happening, what kind of country we wanted to have. And that was exactly the most important challenge, that in 2019, we were having one country, we were having that beautiful momentum with all these changes and proposals and all that, and then in 2020 came the pandemic, the country was closed, everything had to be postponed, and we lost that momentum. And to recover that momentum has been very complicated, because the pandemic has been affecting too much basically the economy of Cuba with the political and social consequences. Because at the end, the pandemic was affecting very much the most important engine of the Cuban economy in the last 30 years, which has been the tourism industry. I mean, in 2019, when we were debating and having all these proposals and all that, we were receiving here in Cuba 5 million tourists. By the way, 1.5 million coming from Canada. And I understood that immediately after my first month in the winter in Canada. Let me tell you, I understood why they were coming here massively. I never understood why Canadians were staying in front of the sun like that for a week. That's what I wanted to do with the eyesight going on that. But then in 2020, from 5 million tourists, 0. It was the collapse of the tourism industry with the consequences for everyone. Because, I mean, the tourism, everybody was feeling the tourism as a very important thing. Why? Because it's benefiting not only the owners of the hotels and the owners of the bed and breakfast or the owners of the restaurants and all that. It's benefiting everyone. I mean, the drivers of the convertible cars, even the plumber who is going to the bed and breakfast to repair things and all that. So everybody was receiving. I mean, it was something that it was a chain of benefits. And it disappeared. I mean, 2021 it was a disaster. And the recovery has been very slowly. I mean, in 2021 we reopened and we received here 250,000 tourists. Then in 2022 it was 1.25 million. Then last year it was 2.4. It's been very slowly, the recovery. The people, I mean, we're a little bit better than 2 years ago, but still it's very complicated to go beyond that. So what was the idea for having a better economy? I don't know if it works like this. That's what the weatherman, they gotta tell me. Well, the idea is to try to build what it was called at that time a prosperous and sustainable socialism. And what it means, we don't know. We don't know. Because, I mean, the problem is that not even Karl Marx, the guy who was creating all the theories of socialism and communism and all that, he didn't say how to do it. What we have had so far has been the interpretation of someone of what socialism should be built. And there have been many interpretations. Unfortunately, my colleagues from the Western political sciences have been identifying socialism and communism. They are not the same, but they have been putting the same label to the Soviet Union. And it was not. I mean, it was an interpretation of Mr. Stalin. That's why we, professors of history here in Cuba, we call it Stalinism. I mean, perhaps it worked fine at the beginning, I mean, after the Second World War, to reorganize that huge country, 15 republics and all that, but at the end it was a failure. So, it's not a model. Are we following a model? Well, I guess that we learned the lesson of not following models anymore, because, I mean, following models has been always a problem. And at the end, we have to create our own model. That's why we do that name, prosperous and sustainable socialism, and we have to find out what it means. It's like a laboratory. You are right now in a laboratory trying to push a country with different ideas and proposals and analysis and all that. Are we going to be successful? We don't know. It can collapse tomorrow. And it's going to be a big problem for Cuba. But at least we are trying to push it. What is the proposal about? Why they say socialism? And why 86% of the people were voting in favor of this model? Your minds, I mean, that idea that they say, no, communism is this, capitalism is this, and all that. No. I mean, that's a very interesting question that I have always with my students. What is capital? When you are in those beautiful private restaurants that you are going to be visiting, and you say, am I in a communist country? You're getting contradictions and all that. And the contradictions is because in your mind you are having that fixed ideas of this is capitalism and this is no. We are trying to evolve. What means socialism for the majority of the Cuban people is to maintain the social benefits that the revolution has been guaranteed to the Cuban people in these 60 years. With ups and downs, I mean the free education, the free healthcare, the subsidies and all these issues. Ups and downs, yes, because in Cuba, for example, you go to a hospital and you don't have to pay a penny. But somebody has to pay for it. And it's the state. So it depends on the money that the state has, its possibilities then to offer a better or worse service. Right now, this is a very big problem.
So what's the tax rate? How do you pay for the services?
I'm going there. So I'm talking about healthcare. Nowadays, lack of medicines, lack of materials, lack of professionals, because even, I mean, there have been many professionals having so many scarcity and difficulties they are living. So in this moment, the medical services are passing through a very delicate situation, a very bad moment. But the majority of the people want to preserve that, because you go to the most remote places in the towns, in the mountains or whatever, and you're going to see the medical post there with the professional there and taking attention, having attention to the elderly people or the pregnant women and all those issues and all that. So perhaps this is the best graphic of what socialism means to the majority of the people. This was the budget, the last budget in normal times before the pandemic that was approved by the National Assembly, because the National Assembly at the end of the year, in December, they approved the budget for the next year. And as you can see, more than 75% of it is dedicated for public health, social assistance, and all those social programs, including public management, which is distributing food for the communities just to solve their problems. It's not much money. There is no money for everyone. This is a great broken economy, but at least it's redistributed. And there are many complaints because, it's not enough, but at least to maintain those social benefits is important. But how to maintain those social benefits in a prosperous and sustainable way? But the proposal, it was to keep in the hands of the state the most important incomes for the economy. Tourism industry, the big resorts like this one. The other two important sources of incomes for the Cuban economy today is biotechnology industry, biotech, and medical services abroad. Why biotech? Because this country doesn't have important natural resources. We don't have important natural resources. We're not like Venezuela with the oil or Bolivia with the lithium. No, we need foreign investment. We need to develop our country, and that's why the government since 1959 was saying, we have to invest in our most important resource, which is the minds of the people. Of course, at that time, in 1959, we had a country which was completely different to the one that we have today. At that time, more than 10% of the people were illiterate here in this country. And 50% of practical illiteracy, because they knew how to write a letter, but they didn't have any contact with it. So that's why in 1961 it was a huge campaign for literacy for everyone, and then after that the battle for 6 grade for everyone, then the battle for 9 grade for everyone. Nowadays, education is for free until university and beyond, either PhD and master's degree, and it's mandatory until 9th grade. And the government has to guarantee that with ups and downs, as I said before, but they have been maintained. So in the 90s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union and the collapse of the sugar industry, what we had to do, we had the sun, the sand, the beaches, the culture, so tourism became the engine, but also they began to invest in knowledge. And biotech was a very important industry that began at that moment. And not by coincidence, during the pandemic, in September 2021, Cuba was the first country in the South to produce our own vaccine against COVID. Not one, but 5. And at the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, we covered the whole population with the vaccine, and COVID was not a problem anymore here. And we didn't have that anti-vaccine movement and all that. I respect all the opinions and all that, but we were able to cover the whole population, and everybody, most of the people were vaccinated, and it was not. And tourism is also part of this. To vaccinate the whole people, because the whole population, just for tourism to come confidently here in Cuba and all that. So that's why biotech has been and they are exporting nowadays not only the COVID vaccine, they are exporting, for example, a vaccine against lung cancer, which is very famous and very effective. A treatment against diabetic feet, avoiding the amputation of the feet of the diabetic people, which is a common problem that they have. A treatment against Alzheimer in phase 1 and 2. By the way, my mom died with Alzheimer, so I know how much we suffer with that. And like that, many other. And medical services that we provide abroad. Why? Because medical assistants here are doing an obsession from the government, from Fidel Castro, and from the people. The people want to have attention to medical. So when we have money, in the 70s and in the 80s, with the Soviet Union and the support and all that, what happened? We were able, unfortunately the government was able to invest and building, for example, national hospitals in all the 15 provinces, and schools of medicines in all the 15 provinces. So still today we have 16 universities of medicine, because there is one more. Here in Havana we have 2. Because there is one which is called the Latin American School of Medicine, which is dedicated only to receive foreign students, not only from Latin America. They are coming even from the United States, by the way. From black poor neighborhoods in the United States, they have an agreement with religious groups, and they receive scholarships, and they come here, and so we are graduating every year thousands of medical professionals. And even with the crisis that we have been passing, Cuba is still the number 1 country with more medical doctors per inhabitants. And we were able to, so nowadays there are more than 60 countries receiving hundreds of thousands of medical doctors, which are going, to different places, basically in South America, basically in Africa, in Asia, but in some developed countries as well. Because, for example, Portugal and Italy has been demanding the presence of Cuban medical doctors, because they go where their medical doctors are not going. In the remote places, in the poor neighborhoods, and all that. So that's why those 3 are the most important sources of income for the Cuban economy, and nowadays they are in a very complete problem. Tourism was a collapse. Now biotechnology is the most important one, and the medical services have been reduced because of the COVID and all that. So that's what you see nowadays in the Cuban economy. We are trying to recover and all that. So the idea was to maintain those 3 in the hands of the state, and all that money to go to the social benefits, and the rest of the economy to open it up for private, cooperative, joint ventures, for investors and all that. And those people are the ones paying taxes. And then all those taxes are going then to the social benefits as well. Because people say, from where you get the money for all those social benefits and all that? That is the way. I have to pay. By the way, today is 28. Oh, I have until tomorrow to pay my tax. I have to leave there. Yes. An accountant, which is a friend of mine, who makes all the numbers. I saw one in math. My God, I can't talk. I'm a professor, but in math, it's something complicated. And let me tell you, the regulations of the taxation system here has 300 pages, so it's very complicated. It's very. My business is considered artist. So So that's why at the end I pay 10% of my incomes. But they have to make a calculation of how much was for this and how much for that. I mean, depending on what I declare that I received last year, then I have to pay about 10%. But there is a progressive tax. I mean, if it is more than this, then you have to pay 15%. If it is more than this, then you pay 20% and all that. And also depends on the area where you are working. Because, for example, artists are paying that, but people related to the tourism, restaurants, bed and breakfast, and all these people, they pay more. I mean, it depends on how many employees you have, and I mean, how big is your business, and all those issues and all that. Sometimes they get up to 40% of paying taxes. But they earn in one day what I earn in 1 year. Let me tell you, I mean, that's a reality.
You don't have deductions in your tax codes? Like number
Yes.
of children,
Yeah.
donations?
Well, the problem is it's only for businesses. I mean, the only people paying taxes here is businesses. People having businesses. The rest of the people don't pay taxes. We don't pay taxes. The only people pay taxes here is... Oh yeah, I mean, there should be something good, right? So that is the idea. I mean, to have all that. I mean, I always say that to have private businesses was nothing new. Because when I said that when the collapse of the Soviet Union, again, it was a very important moment here in Cuba, because it was the end of a very long time that Cuba was having in a very failed model. Because we were monoproductive, sugar, and rum, which is related to sugar, and mono-exportive to one place, to Spain for centuries, then to the United States, then to the Soviet Union. When it collapsed everything. Because we never had to find our own sources of food, our own sources of energy, anything. So that's why we had to begin to find, and we opened even for private businesses. So in 2018, the year before of the Constitution, about 30%, more than 30% of the people were working by themselves in a system that it was called cuentapropistas, self-workers. But the proposal of the new Constitution was to implement in Cuba what in international economic theory is called MIPYME. MIPYME in Spanish, but in English is MSME. Is micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Oh. I cannot be the word man. Microsoft. If you pay attention to Cubans, they talk a lot about MIPYME, micro, pequeña y mediana empresa, micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Basically in private hands. Why? Because I mean, it's to create the dynamics. I mean, to put incentives for the people to work by themselves and to get the money in their pockets, and then to push also for the economy of the country. And yes.
Are most of the micro, small, and medium businesses related to tourism?
I'm going there. The issue is that, I mean, as this is the cornerstone of the economic transformations that was approved in the Constitution, it began to be implemented during the pandemic in September 2021. And in these 2 years, they have been creating more than 10,000 new private enterprises here. As you can see, well, this is not updated because every week it grows. And there have been 2 weeks that I haven't updated, I'm sorry. I always try to be updated, but I mean, it's more than that because every week, every Thursday, today is, well, tomorrow, they are going to announce 100 new, 130 new, 80 new, 70 new. I mean, that is the way it works. But it's basically, I mean, more jobs for the people, and at the same time, many as local development projects, I mean, to develop programs in the communities and to produce. What you are asking, fortunately, the Minister of Economy has been saying that most of them has been going for manufacturing, and that is a very important news. Whatever. I mean, shirts, food, whatever you want. I mean, many, in whatever skills they are. I mean, they have been not identified for this. But manufacturing is very good. And in second, for construction. And that was a very good news. And I will set up a word about that because you're going to see these days how much we need new businesses for building houses and rebuilding houses and all those issues. Basically here in Havana. In the countryside is different, but here in Havana it's very complicated. This is a very important point of reference for you, for example. We are having now more than 10,000 private enterprises and about 2,000 state enterprises. So, okay, you're going to tell me, these are employing thousands of people. That's true. I mean, biotech or tourism industry and all that, but at least it shows the will of the Cuban government to try to diversify that as much as possible and to create that dynamics. Perhaps tourism is the better example of these dynamics, because you are here in this hotel or in the Mutu Hotel, which belongs to the state in agreement with another company from outside, I mean, in a joint venture. But when you get out of there, then you go to a private restaurant, and then you're going to go to a community project managed by the people in the community. Or then you move in a bus that it belongs to a cooperative, and they receive money in accordance to the trip that they do and all that. So that is a combination that in a normal economy it should work fine. But this is a broken economy. So we need double effort, or 3 or 4 or 5 times effort just to go the economy, to push the economy in a better way. So it's very complicated. Yes.
So are all the hotels cooperatives?
Most of the hotels are joint ventures.
And there's
I'm
profit.
going there. you and I have the same way of thinking.
On that last slide, I didn't see agriculture anywhere. Can you grow, besides tobacco?
Agriculture is another sector. I mean, it's not included in the MIPIMES. I mean, it has a special development, and I'm going to explain that, a few minutes. I mean, that was another thing which is very important. I mean, I said we need foreign investment. Foreign investment is another big transformation that we have to have. So there were new regulations to have more foreign investors here in Cuba, flexibilizing the possibilities. And nowadays we are having about 330 brave foreign companies investing here in Cuba, in joint ventures and in different ways of organizing that. Some people say, no, but you're following the Chinese model, where you have to have 51% of benefits and then the others are having 49 or less. No. The regulation has been transformed into, because we're not in conditions to say, no, I don't want this business because I'm not going to receive 51% of benefits. I mean, at the end, they pay taxes, and big taxes. They employ Cuban workers, and they do something good for the Cuban economy. So at the end, you see that from these 330, 56 are 100% benefiting of their investments because they are doing something good for the economy. Yes.
For the foreign investments, are foreigners allowed to own real estate in Cuba?
No. One of the things that was approved during the new constitution was that the property is in the hands of Cubans. Why? Because we are still having the, I don't know how to call it, I mean the sensation and the need to be the owners of the country. Because before 1959, almost 80% of the land and the economy was in the hands completely of foreign companies. And the revolution was trying precisely to change that. I mean, to give the ownership to the Cubans, and the Cubans to form. Let me tell you, in this constitution, I mean, it's been 60 years later, they have been opening a space, and they say that the National Assembly can approve, and the National Assembly, the parliament, is the most important body here in Cuba, can approve a specific companies or foreigners who can have property for specific reasons benefiting the Cuban economy. I mean, there's a way. That is something that.
So if for somebody to come in for FDI for a hotel, for example,
Yes.
they don't own the hotel, they pay the workers, but then they get the cash flow from that?
It depends on all the negotiations. I mean, it depends on the negotiations. It's open. As you see, there are many different ways. And the most important is International Economic Association. What it means, I don't know. I mean, it's just to have a different ways of organizing. It can be that, no, you are going to be managing the hotel. No, you are going to be managing, but you have to supply this and this and this. No, I mean, it depends on the negotiations. I mean, it's very flexible, the possibility of the negotiation.
China is investing in a lot of countries overseas. Is there the significant Chinese investment?
Well, China here in Cuba nowadays is participating, and it's one of the most important investors here in Cuba. Why? Because what they have been doing basically has been providing soft credits to Cuba. Because of other reasons that I'm going to explain now. For Cuba, it's very difficult to go to international banking systems or financial institutions just to ask for money. So China is the only one providing soft credits, and it means, I don't know if you are familiar with that term. I mean, they say this amount of thousands of dollars, and you are going to pay back in 5-10 years, I mean in the long term, and 15% of benefits, and I'm going to participate in the investment. Why are you asking the money? And then for the development of telecommunications, Okay, we are going to provide also the technology and all that. So that's why the technology here is basically Chinese for telecommunications. And your iPhones are not working very well here because they speak in English and our technology speaks in Chinese. So, but they are also participating, for example, in Chinese. They are providing the credits and also providing the buses and all those issues. And so that is a very beneficial issue that we are having with them. And the other big important area where they are participating is in finding new sources of energy and basically clean sources of energy. Because I was saying, when the collapse of the Soviet Union happened, it was the collapse of everything. And the collapse, now we complain about the blackouts and the problems, but at that moment in the 90s, we didn't have oil, because all the oil was coming from the Soviet Union, the Socialist Bloc. Not even food, because all the food was coming. If you ask the people of my generation or older, they're going to tell you that in the 80s, we were living in paradise and we didn't know. Because of the subsidies from the Soviet Union and all that, it was a very important issue and we were surviving that. But we didn't have to find our own sources of energy. So when we opened the economy in the 90s, for example, there was a Canadian company coming to Cuba and extracting our own gas. And nowadays, 45% of the energy that we produce, that we consume, is produced by those people. They're not going to Matanzas now. No. Well, if you go to Matanzas, which is the closest city that we have from Havana, it's an hour and a half from here, you would see then the Canadian flags with the power plant, blue power plants, and the smell of the gas because they are producing that. That is one of the joint ventures that happens since the 90s, since the very beginning of the 90s. So there are many.
Does Cuba have significant rare earth metals like lithium, cadmium, which are used for batteries, like electric batteries for automobiles?
It depends on what is imported. And importation of buses and of cars and all that is very limited. We are more dedicated.
We have those minerals, lithium metals, usually batteries.
I was to say, not only, before going there, I was to say that the Chinese are also participating in finding new sources. Because one of the things that was coming out from the discussions of the new constitution was to try to produce our energy and to be, not to be so more dependent on oil, because that's so complicated. So we have the gas, the oil is very heavy, it has too much sulfur, so we have to readapt some power plants to consume our oil. But then to produce new sources of energy, solar panels, windmills, and biomass. The American market is close to us. European market is very complicated. So Chinese are investing then in trying to build here a factory of solar panels. But not, lithium is more complicated and more expensive. Well, we have been importing many motorbikes, scooters, right? Scooters with lithium and all that. But we are totally dependent on the importation of everything, which is very complicated at the end, because then we don't depend from the oil, but then we are going to depend from the batteries of lithium. So it's something we have to think in a way that it's going to. So there are many. I'm not saying that this is beautiful, that this is the paradise. We have many problems, many difficulties because of the consequences of, the debacle of the economy, because of the tourism industry and all those issues. But the people are wanting to maintain those social benefits. For example, I put here one picture of, this is the ration card. I don't know if you know that the government for more than 60 years has been providing goods for everyone in equal basis in subsidized prices, which is on the very discussions today. But everyone received here in Cuba an amount of food, which is not enough. You're going to hear many complaints about that. And it's distributed by a ration card. This is a ration card. You go every month, and then you go to the bodega, and perhaps you're going to be visiting the bodegas, and she's going to explain how it works on that. And then you receive every month in subsidized prices 7 pounds of rice, 5 pounds of sugar, 5 eggs, and this and that. And people say, 5 eggs? Well, that's why I don't like to call it the ration card, because it seems that we are living because of rations. Well, if you have more money, then you can go to other markets and you can buy it. It's very expensive. The carton of eggs can be 2,000 or more, 2,500 Cuban pesos. But at least the government guarantees for you 5 eggs every month for not having money in the country, which is something that is good and bad, let me tell you. It's fair and not fair, because everybody receives the same amount if you work or if you don't work.
Is it based on per person, like a family of 5 would get 5 more than a family
Yes,
of 3?
multiply 7 or 5. It's that amount of rice. It's a lot of rice.
And that's the exercise that they have. Californians,
Yes, but the problem with agriculture, and you were asking about agriculture, somebody else was asking, no, yeah, you. The problem with agriculture is, it's very complex. I mean, together with the failure of the government to deal with agriculture, how to make it, how to make it produce, and how to incentivize the people to work and all that, there are other factors which are playing a very negative role as well. First, we don't have the culture of farming, which is very dramatic. Why? Because Cuba, forever, for 500 years, was dedicated to producing sugar. It was 85% of the land producing sugar. And we were not having the culture of farming. We were having the culture of being agrarian workers, working for the sugar industry. And there were 150 sugar mills. In 1989, we were producing 8 million tons of sugar. And 150 sugar mills producing sugar. Suddenly, when it collapsed because to produce sugar it was very expensive. I mean, it was all mechanized, and water systems, and fertilizers, and pesticides, and all that disappeared, because we were receiving all that from the Soviet Union, and before from the United States. But then it disappeared. So, what happened? Disappeared from the countryside, everything. Because you can imagine, 150 sugar mills, there were many small towns that were created because of the sugar mill. And nowadays, from the 150 sugar mills, they are producing less than 20. So you can imagine what happened to the rest of April. Many of them, they were leaving to the big cities. As we began to develop tourism industry, the same people were going from there and they learned to speak English or to speak whatever, and they would travel. And in the countryside, we have not much people just to dedicate for doing that. And at the same time, huge extensions of because I don't know if you are familiar with the production of sugar. I mean, sugar eats too much nutrients. So you produce sugar here in this area this year. Next year you have to produce in that area. The other year in that area. Yeah, in the 5th year you can come back to that. So that's why you're going to see huge areas of land which are not producing, because they were dedicated forever to sugar industry. And at the end, well, one of the biggest transformations that they have been having is, for example, from that 85% of the land, 70% has been distributed in these 20 years to the workers. So they don't have money. Right? Because agriculture is something that you don't have the seed and then you have a harvest. You need water systems, you need fertilizers, you need pesticides, you need know-how, you need investment. So that is one of the areas that for us, I mean, it's very painful, because we import almost 70% of the food that we eat, which is very complicated. But we don't have the means and the people and the knowledge just to develop the agriculture. That is one of the important issues that we were proposing to Obama, and there were negotiations. And let me tell you, I was here 2 weeks ago with one group, and there was a delegation of the Ministry of Agriculture of the United States here. I don't know what they were doing. In electoral years, you can hear anything. Alright, let's hope. And that is a very important issue that I wanted to tell you, that it's been a very complicated issue for the development of the Cuban economy. It's in the foreign perspective. And it is, unfortunately, when the country that you live and the government that you have. Because unfortunately, this, that is very well known as the US economic embargo against Cuba, has been playing the most negative role in the possibilities of development of the Cuban economy. And why? Because it is not right now a bilateral issue. The problem is that it's not only prohibiting American companies to try to invest in Cuba, and their subsidiaries all over the world. It's been also imposing sanctions against other companies from other countries trying to invest in Cuba. That is a big complication that we still have to take. I'm going to explain that. This was the origin of the embargo. I mean, people blame Kennedy, because you remember the picture of Kennedy signing the regulations of the embargo in February 7, 1962. But look at this. 1960. It was from before. It was Eisenhower. I always blame Eisenhower for the problems that we have later, unfortunately, because they had a wrong perception about the revolution in 1959. What happened? We had another revolution in 1933. Nobody talks about that, but yes, we had another revolution in 1933 to have an independent project and all that. The problem was that at that time, they were able to influence the leaders of that revolution, and it went nowhere. Basically, the most important military leader of that revolution, who was Fulgencio Batista. Perhaps it sounds familiar to you. And then later he became the monster that he became, because, I mean, with all the influences that he was receiving, he was selling the country to anyone, basically to the mafia. Maeransky, And those people were having the plan of destroying the whole Malecon. I mean, you know, the Malecon is the road to build 50 casinos there. I mean, the idea of Vegas was for Havana. I don't know if you watched The Godfather, the second part.
Yes.
It's very illustrative of what happened there. So they believe that, well, with the new revolution, okay, we're going to pay. It does not happen. So they said they are radical nationalists. What we're going to do, that was Eisenhower administration, we're going to stop the possibility of any American company to try to invest in Cuba. And as they are so dependent on us, it's going to create hungerness, economic difficulties, starvation, and all that. And it's going to be the Cuban people that is the one responsible to overthrow the Cuban regime. And they're coming back in 6 months. It didn't happen because it was a wrong perception. I mean, we were not alone in this war. I mean, that's what I say to my students all the time. You cannot judge history from now. You have to be in the moment that it happened. And in 1960, what was it? The Cold War, the most important expression. There were two big worlds there. One was closing the door, so it was what I say to put Cuba very easily in the hands of Nikita Khrushchev in the Soviet Union. He said, well, if the Americans are not buying the sugar, we are going to buy to you. And if the Americans are not selling you the oil, the food, and whatever, we're going to feed you. Because it's 90 miles away from the shores of our enemy. You know, I mean, it was a present for us. And then we were able to develop, I mean, it was a decision for who? True. Okay. Just to get into that game between the two superpowers and all that. But we were able to develop then the healthcare, and the education, and all position. But the problem was that in 1991, when the collapse of the Soviet Union happened, they said, this is the moment. They are going to go. I don't know if you remember that last time they were saying that Cuba was a satellite from the Soviet Union. You remember that? Well, they are going to collapse. But then we opened the economy for foreign investment, for tourism industry, and there were Canadians and Spanish companies coming, investing here in Cuba, and then the economy began to recover. And nothing was happening in 1992, 1993, 1994, 1995. So the embargo was transformed into something different. Because it was a bilateral issue, but then they began to approve legislations. Basically this I had to practice as a lawyer. Basically this one in 1996. In March 1996 they approved a legislation that has been passed into the history, the name Helms-Burton Act. I don't know if you remember Senator Jesse Helms from North Carolina. At that time they didn't have Marco Rubio, they have Jesse Helms. And what they did, they began to impose sanctions against those companies of other countries trying to invest in Cuba. And for example, among the first ones was Melia Hotels. You have heard about Melia Hotel. There's a Melia Hotel next to your hotel, or very close to here. It's a Melia Habana, and there's the Melia Coiba, and there are others like that. But Melia Hotels, in 1996, as soon as Helms-Burton was approved, they received a notification in Madrid, their headquarters, from the Treasury Department in Washington saying, if you continue investing in the Cuban economy, in the tourism industry, you're going to lose your properties in the United States, because that's what Helms-Burton says. Fortunately, Sol Melia decided to sell their hotels in Florida and to continue investing in Cuba. So that's why now they are the kings. You can find Sol Melia hotels all over the island. But the majority of the companies, they had to leave. I mean, I remember that they were here, the Sandals hotels in Jamaica. Sandals. You see the sign? Yeah. And they said, oh, we love you, but we cannot renounce our hotels in Florida. I'm sorry. Bye-bye, Miss American Pie. I remember that also we had ING Bank from the Netherlands. I was in the Netherlands. I got the orange one and all that. They received a sanctions of $614 million because of making transactions in US dollars to Cuba. They left. They said, no, we are not going to renounce to the financial economy of the United States. And they left. These Canadians who are producing the 45% of the energy that we consume. I know them very well. I was 4 years in Canada. Being Canadians, they cannot enter the United States because they're investing in Cuba. They're sanctioned. They cannot send their children to any American college because they're in the blacklist. They cannot get into any finances or credits or whatever because of that. So they are putting any investor in Cuba, even today, in a very difficult situation, or Cuba or the United States. Choose. And here, I mean, asymmetry is playing a very important role because, I mean, it's the most important economy in the world, and Cuba. Whatever. And perhaps those examples were from a long time ago, I mean from 90s and 2000s. But 3 months ago, or 4 months ago, there was a financial institution in the United States announcing that they were sanctioning Pemex. I don't know if you know Pemex, Petróleos Mexicanos. It's, the most important oil company in Mexico and one of the most important in Latin America. And they were sanctioning them with $800 million that they were asking for credit and all that because they were selling oil to Cuba. Like that. So it's very easy to blame the government with the blackouts and that, and the big lines of gasoline that you see here in Cuba. I suffer it, I have a car, so sometimes it's very complicated. But then at the same time to sanction those people who are selling the oil and the gas to Cuba, which is very complicated. And even today, this is playing a very negative role. And I'm sorry, I have to say this. I'm sorry. When we believed that there were no more possibilities of strengthening the environment and all that, we got this. Trump administration was approving more than 200 new measures. That has been very complicated to deal with that. We can be talking for hours about that, but I'm going to mention two of them which are the most important ones for you, for you to know. One, they couldn't stop the possibilities of American citizens to go to Cuba. What they were doing, they were publishing every month a list of places where American citizens, while in Cuba, could not get in. And they included all the hotels in Cuba. All the hotels that we had at that time, they were included in that list. Because they were joint venture with the state or whatever, any justification, all of them they were included. So that's why, this hotel was not included because this used to be the approval that Obama did for Sheraton. This used to be the Sheraton here in Havana in Obama times. And the Mutu, they're staying in the Mutu, right? It was built 3 months ago. It was opening very recently. So it's not in the blacklist of Trump. That's why you're there. Because it's not in the blacklist of Trump. But the rest, and the people are complaining, why new hotels in the others are empty? Well, they're empty. Well, if we want to have, like in Obama times, we were receiving more than 1 million Americans here in Cuba, we have to build new hotels. Because these big groups, you cannot be located in different bed and breakfasts and all that, because it's going to be very complicated for them to organize you, and then he wants to have you and to pick you up and all that. But then something else, and I'm sorry I have to say this as well. Biden administration hasn't done anything to change any of those regulations. Not the Trump administration, not the ones in the 90s, not the original ones. So we are still trying to survive and fighting with all those regulations and restrictions and trying to find the ways of, avoid those regulations and all that. So that's why I say this is not an economic embargo, not an blockade, as some people call it. It's an economic war against Cuba because it's very complicated to deal with that every day. I don't want to be in the skin of the leaders here because with the lack of money that they have, just to choose where they put the money today, because tomorrow there should be other priorities. So it's a very complicated economic situation that we have with the political and social consequences that it has. So I just want to finish my ideas with what is behind this. Because more than 60 years with this obsolete and very difficult policies to Cuba. You can go to North Korea and do whatever you want and Cuba. But you can put a list of places, a list of arguments that are in the middle of it. But in my perspective, the most important difficulty that we have with all these issues is that there is a bunch of people in South Florida making money from that. Basically, in Cuban origin. You have heard about Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, Bob Menendez. Those are 3 senators. Bob Menendez, you have heard about Bob Menendez recently. I like to call him the collector. He likes to collect golden bars. You have heard that he was involved in a business, in a corruption issue with golden bars coming from Egypt and from Qatar. No, you haven't heard about that. Well, yeah. Those 3 who are saying that they're Cubans, you know Cuba better than those people. Because none of them were born in Cuba. None of them have ever been in Cuba, let me tell you. And I hope they don't have anyone here in Cuba, because if they do this to their own family, what kind of human being you are, right? And a number of congressmen, Mario Diaz-Salazar from Florida, not Lincoln, is his brother, Mario Diaz-Balart. By the way, Diaz-Balart is another hyphenate last name. You see how common is that? But this Diaz-Balart is not a very beautiful last name here in Cuba, because his father, Rafael Diaz-Balart, was a very close friend of Batista. One of the ministers of Batista who was escaping very soon with all the money that he could have, and then he was in Miami organizing things and all that. And unfortunately, all those people in the Senate and in the House, they have been very well organized since the 1980s. They have been creating an anti-Cuba lobby, as we call it. which are having lots of influence in Washington and in South Florida. And they make lots of money from the hard line against Cuba. How they make the money? With your money, by the way, the one that you pay by taxes. Because every year they approve in the federal Congress, based on the narrative on Cuba, on the brutal dictatorship, on the Castro regime, I mean, Castro remote, however it works, and communism, Mufasa, and I mean, the lack of freedoms, the lack of information, I can demonstrate here, right now, that in my cell phone, which is Chinese, by the way, I can read the New York Times and the Washington Post of today. I can read it, there's no problem with that. But they say no, Cubans don't have accessibility to free information, so they approve millions of dollars for democracy programs in Cuba, for human rights programs in Cuba, for freedom of information to the Cuban people, and they finances, for example, Radio and TV Martin, which is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, transmissions against Cuba and all that. And all that money for democracy in Cuba and all that is not coming to Cuba. All that money is distributed by a number of institutions, federal institutions, to a number of organizations basically based in South Florida. Money here, money there. And they're organizing courses and seminars and training for the moment that is the collapse of communism in Cuba and we're going to have democracy in Cuba, for the radio and TV transmissions, for this and for that. And it's millions of dollars coming from Washington to Miami. And at the end, they are the ones putting the money for them to be re-elected. So also money coming from Miami to Washington. And it's a circle of money which is very difficult to go beyond. These are the organizations that have been receiving more money, all based in the story of democracy in Cuba and making a living from there. And it's very difficult to go beyond that. The only president who went beyond these people, it was Obama. And he literally ignored them, and he went beyond. And he was putting Cuba in the foreign policy agenda for the benefit of American business and all that. He was flexibilizing when he could, because he couldn't change the embargo. He was very brave to go against these people, and that's why if you ask any Cuban here in Cuba, ask them when was the best moment that you were having, they're going to say Obama, one word. It doesn't have the same meaning for you. I mean, it has a different political connotation. The significance for them is the consequences of the policies that they were having, and the economy was blooming in 2015 and 2016. There were many Americans coming, and the people were coming in cruise ships, and there were thousands of Americans moving around and paying things and all that, and the benefit that I was telling you before and all that, including many CEOs of very important companies of the United States. They were visiting Cuba at that time, including Trump. I don't know if you know that Trump was sending here people in 2015 to try to build the Trump Tower. And by the way, the Trump Tower was planned to be in the Mutu, I mean in the place where you are living, by the way. I mean, they were making an analysis of building 2 towers, or in the other ugly buildings that there are there, the 2 and 3 hotels, which are empty most of the time. In that area, they were planning to have a Trump Tower here in Havana. And they were trying to invest in golf courses here in Varadero Beach, by the way. But the problem was that when he got involved in politics, and then to get elected and all that, when he entered the White House, now we know, because at that moment we didn't know. He changed 4 times his position about Cuba when he was campaigning, so we didn't know which was the position that he would take about Cuba. But since the very beginning, he was very clear. Because now we know that in the first meeting that he had entering to the White House, one of the staffers was asking, hey, what about the Cuba policy? Because, I mean, Obama was putting the hand over here, you are a businessman, you send people there to invest, what will happen? His answer was very clear. His answer was, no. In the case of Cuba, let Marco Rubio be happy. You remember that, right? But in political terms, it meant that he was taking Cuba out of the foreign policy agenda when Obama was putting it for the benefit of American business and all that, to put it in the domestic perspective, to please those politicians in South Florida. And that is a very complicated issue just to deal with. And there are 2 things, and I finish. 2 important things here. Florida is a swing state. No matter what you say, I mean, yes, Democrats are going to try to regain Florida. They have been saying recently, it's 29 electoral votes, it's a very important state. And second, which is as important as this, Cuba is not a priority in the foreign policy agenda of the United States. Cuba is not Israel, Cuba is not Ukraine or Russia or China, whatever. So in practical terms, for Biden, he's not putting anything in risk, not changing the Cuba policy. Because at the end, who cares? I mean, everybody cares. I mean, Cuba mostly. And in the United States, I'm sure that the majority of Americans care. But in the big politics perspectives, nobody cares. So those are very complicated issues that we have to deal with. I mean, that's why I wanted to go from the internal perspective to the external perspective, all the challenges that we have. So there's no other way for Cuba than to try to get in all these changes and all this to push the economy in the way that we can. Yes.
So if the US imposes embargo,
Well, in Argentina now it's impossible because Milei is strong. Yeah, they were embracing to each other the other day, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, they were together and they Milei was saying, make Argentina great again. Hello, I mean, what? Yes, that's Argentina. Well, with other countries, yes. But there should be, alliance, and that is one of the strategies that we have to find. New alliances, for example, BRICS is a very important group. You know BRICS?
yes.
Well, BRICS is a group of countries that has been getting together in the last like 10 years or something, which is the names of the countries which are belonging. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which are, closer to Cuba and having more opportunities. That is why the most important objective of the foreign policy of Cuba today is to diversify as much as possible our markets and our relationship with everyone. But at the end, they are having problems, let me tell you, because people say, well, with China, I'm going to put you one example of how Chinese, being so powerful and being so independent, they have a problem. The only mineral that we have here in Cuba, in big terms, is nickel. And nickel is an strategic mineral. And it's together with cobalt, which is also strategic. We have, they say, the third most important open air reserve of nickel in the world. But I don't know if you saw in the regulations of the embargo that one of the first ones since 1962 it was the prohibition to import to the United States anything that contains at least 10% of human components. Everybody thinks immediately in rum and cigars. And I hope you are going to get as much as possible these days in rum and cigars. Because you cannot bring them back to the States. Not even for your friends or your relatives. That's a very complicated issue. But it includes nickel. And then, just example. This is a Chinese device. When they import this device to the United States, and by the way, this was coming from my family in Miami, so it was imported to the United States. They have to declare from where were the minerals that they were using to produce this, because that's the regulations of the United States. And if they say that the nickel is Cuban, forget it, it's not important. And I'm talking about a device which is small, but thinking cars or industries or satellites or whatever. So it's very complicated to deal with Cuba, because you have a bad letter in the background of your products and anything. I was in Canada, and when I was in Canada, there was a negotiation from the Ministry of Internal Trade here in Cuba to buy chicken. You can imagine the chicken that they provide in the ration card. Multiply that for 11 million. How many tons of chicken they had to buy? And it was a big business for anyone. And the Canadians were saying, great, perfect. Boom, this is good. But at the end they said, but we have to add 15% to the prices. And we were like, what? Why? No, because of the Cuba risk. And what is the Cuba risk? No, the problem is that if in the future we are going to sell chicken to the United States, then we have this in our record, and it's possible that they're going to lose the opportunity to export chicken to the United States, which is our closest neighbor. Canadians are so dependent on the United States that it happens every day. So that is a problem that we have in any step that we do. People here are sick and tired of talking about the embargo. It's true that there are people there are some people here using the embargo to justify their inefficiencies. That's true. But the embargo is playing a very negative role for anything, even for our friends and for the possibilities of our friends just to have businesses with Cuba. Something was, yes.
I feel like what I'm going to ask is pretty naive. But
No. There are no naive and no offenses.
So I don't know. I just think in my naive American mind, I always thought that the embargo was because of the Castro regimes, and now the Castro regimes are gone. So why is it, in your opinion, that you
colleagues from the Western political sciences because of all these issues. I mean, they have been labeling and personalizing very complex processes, political, social, and economic processes with a name, Castro.
Right.
And let me tell you, that's not naive. Any time that I was going anywhere in the United States, in Canada, if I was dancing in a disco at 2 a.m. in the morning trying to do something, you know, when they were knowing, oh, you're Cuban from Cuba. The first question, what would happen in Cuba when Fidel Castro dies? I was like, well, office hours from Monday to Friday. Come on, we're dancing, right? We're going to do something, right? And Castro in the middle. Because they were obsessed with Castro, communism. Then when Castro disappeared, now communism. Are you feeling in a communist country with all this private business and all that? No. But the revolution, because the revolution goes beyond that. And it's going to continue being, I mean, even if it collapses, there will be a civil war here in Cuba, let me tell you. I mean, because it would be naive to think that, oh yeah, some people, I know, and Cubans, no, it's going to be a social democrat government. No. There are many people in South Florida waiting just for the revolution collapse to come. And there are going to be people fighting here. It's going to be a civil war, creating a very problematic issue for the United States because the big exodus. That was what Obama was clear, and the Americans are clear of that. Obama was saying that the best thing that we can do with Cuba, he said, it was just to be there. Because if there is a collapse, it's going to create a big problem to the United States because of the exodus of Cubans. Because of the civil war that is going to happen in Cuba. That was Obama, it was not me. But the problem is, I mean, originally it was because of the revolution, the transformations and all that. But lately, because of all those Cuban Americans making money from that. And they don't care about Cuba. That's a very strong, because they care about the money. I mean, because they made lots of money from that. And it's a win-win game for them. Because if the revolution collapses, they take it all. If the revolution doesn't collapse, the money is running. And it's easier to get the money in that way.
Okay, but aren't the people that started those little clubs or whatever you had listed up there, the ones who had their homes and everything taken away, all their wealth taken away from them, and they had to escape?
I just want to say something.
Okay.
If you go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Cuba, in the archives, you are going to find that there have been more than 200 proposals from the Cuban government to solve the nationalization process back in 1961 to the American government. There haven't been any political will from the American government to solve that. Just to blame the Cuban government because we are not solving that. So it's something which is a busy circle which is going nowhere. The only moment that there were negotiations to try to reach an agreement, it was with Obama. We were very close to reach an agreement. But the same, they don't want to solve it because that is a perfect argument not to change the Cuba policy. So the obstacle was coming from that. And I'm going to tell you, more than 80% of the debt that we have is with the big American companies.
Yes.
More than 80% is with the big American companies. And many of them, they were coming back when Obama and trying to solve it. So that is not a problem. The other big part of this 20 other percent, the most amount of it, it was what, 7 or 8 Cuban rich families. Fanjul family. I mean, perhaps you have heard about Fanjul, which is the king of sugar in Florida. Tarafa family, Gomez Mena family, Bacardi family. By the way, the Bacardi lawyers were the ones writing the Helms-Burton Act. But even then, they say, and I read it in Forbes magazine, that Bacardi family is divided because there are some who want to come back and there are others who doesn't want and they want to continue making this. And Fanjul, Alfonso Fanjul, who is the king of sugar and all that, he came during Obama. He came to Cuba and he wanted to reinvest in his own properties that he lost. I mean, he didn't lose much. I mean, he lost a property, but all the money was on the other side. So there is another amount, which is the house that they lost here in Cuba, that this and that, which is not that significant, but we can solve it. We have been proposing to solve it. We know that to solve the problem between Cuba and the United States, we have to pass through that process. But there should be a willing from the other side to restore that, and to repair that. We are in this position, and we have been saying all the time, we are in this position to do it. Something else, yes.
We were talking about the Constitution, voting, the word is sensitivities. You should use the word mindset, the way the Cubans were thinking at the time of their voting.
Yeah.
So it's just as a replacement. The other thing is, one of my colleagues at the CUNY, State University, City University of New York, just told me, David, this is a family argument, and he's right. I'd rather stay out of this. But unfortunately, I don't think any of us can. But we should let the families argue. When I say families, I mean people here and the people in my country.
Yes, that's true. I totally agree with you. I mean, I was saying that it has to pass through the healing process. And let me tell you, it's happening.
It's diplomatic.
And let me tell you, it's happening. It's happening. Because, I mean, there is a big difference. Every family here in Cuba, if you ask anyone here in Cuba, every family here in Cuba has, my example, I'm sorry to put a personal example. My mom, she was the youngest of 8 brothers and sisters. In 1959-1960, the 3 oldest brothers, they left. And they were not related to Batista, they were not related to the mafia, they were not nothing. They were afraid of communism and all that because there were lots of it was very politicized and the people were afraid and all that, and they left. You know what? We never came back at all. Ever. My mom died with the sadness that she didn't know anything about these 3 brothers and their families and anything, and that they never were interested in us. That's right. But I can tell you, in the recent emigrations, other part of my family has been leaving, and they are coming back and forth. And I'm planning, for example, to open a coffee shop, and my nephew is going to bring me the coffee machine from Tampa. And they pay my cell phone, by the way. So that is a reality that happens in the family issue, which is true, I mean, totally true. It has to pass through that. But during Obama, when Obama was flexibilizing the possibilities to Cuban Americans to come to Cuba, and he was completely free, and he was opening the possibility from different cities from the United States to go to different cities in Cuba and all that, 66% of Cuban Americans were coming back and forth. 66. So that is the way. That's what we are saying. Leave us alone. And I mean, if you don't want that the American businesses are in Cuba, okay, leave us alone. Don't sanction the others. And leave the Cuban Americans to come back and forth. Last year, Cuba was announcing publicly that the economy of Cuba is open for the Cuban Americans. Like that. There are people doing it. I mean, in my perspective, it's a wise perspective because I mean, all those people from the business. By the way, that business, not us, academic people in the United States call it the hate industry on Cuba because it's an industry, it makes money. But you put the Cuban in a situation, I support the hate business or I support my family there. And I send there. When Obama, it was happening for the first time, not only money coming from the United States to Cuba, it was also money coming from Cuba to the United States. How? Because they are investing. You're going to be visiting beautiful restaurants here in Cuba these days. And it's in a broken economy. We don't have money for anything. But those beautiful restaurants, from where they get the money? From their relatives and all that. So that is part of the healing process that I'm talking about.
Well, good luck. I just gotta
Thank
say,
you. That's something else, other thing, other idea.
Good luck to you.
So, yes.
So how do you reconcile with private industry growing, and it seems to, from what we've heard over the last day, it seems to pay more than private industry. So for example, a doctor might be the same as some of the people.
That's one of the big.
How do you adjust that?
No. That is one of the biggest contradictions that we have and we have to solve. I mean, I have no answer for that because that's a very complicated issue. Yes. But at the same time, I mean, it has many interpretations and oppositions. It's bad. It's bad. And basically, we're focused in the concern in the medical system and in the educational system, which are the basis of socialism in Cuba and all that, and they are not very well done. That is a very sad situation. But at the same time, they are dependent on the budget of the state, and the state doesn't have money. So they are trying to, they are making steps. You have to give them also the defense that, for example, in January this year they began to increase. What happened? In 2020 they increased the salaries of medical doctors and professors. What happened? Inflation went up. Because there are so many people in the medical system and in the education that, everything was going up. Well, now they make another one, but it was more selective. For professionals, for medical doctors that have been having more than 20 years, they receive this amount. More than 10 years, they receive this amount. If you make more, we call it guards. Call at the hospital, then you receive more money, and then it was more selective. It was not everyone. And if you are a professor with a PhD, and then you are going to earn this, and then, they were making those movements, but not enough money. And that is a very contradiction that we have. Something else, but thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day.